We need to thank our chairman of the board for this sutta. He's the one that pointed it out to me, and I'm surprised that I missed it because it's such a significant sutta. But it kind of followed on our retreat and the skillful focus we had on right speech, and even our discussion on one of those nights about the sexual predation in modern Buddhism and all that. And this really follows that, and it supports what we do in our sangha. You know, this is why it works for us, because we all, not just me, we all engage in this, and it's really a teaching on right speech, and it follows nicely the retreat. It also follows the Kula Sakaka Sutta that we taught on a Tuesday and Saturday just a week ago, where the Kula Sakaka Sutta, the Buddhist debating Sakaka about what is his Dhamma, how does he teach it, what's the main themes. And of course, these main themes are gaining insight into the 3 marks of existence, is what the Buddhist Dhamma is all about. So that sutta is the importance of what a Dhamma teacher will teach and why. And this sutta is really more how to teach the Dhamma, or really in a broader sense, how to live in the world from right speech. And he uses the another debate with another Jain, Sakaka was a Jain, in a way of properly answering or framing questions, or framing answers. On one occasion, the Buddha was staying at the squirrel sanctuary in the bamboo forest near Rajagaha. A local prince, Prince Abhaya, went to the Jain. The Jain religion was a competing religion during the Buddha's time, quite different than what the Buddha taught. Excuse me. Although, just finishing dinner. Hold on a second. It's always nice when you have dentures. You got these little pockets that you can save dinner for later. That's really gross. Why did I say that? Every now and then. Cut that out. The Jain religion, still a religion today, still a worldwide religion. There's probably millions of Jain practitioners. And during the Buddha's time, it was a prevalent religion that was often seen as almost like Buddhism. In fact, even today, people will talk about what they don't understand, that Jainism is really Buddhism with a few little twerks, but it's really the Jain religion is based on the Vedas and the Upanishads, the precursor to modern Hinduism. The Buddha studied those teachings and rejected them at hand as not leading to the goal. Doesn't mean that they're not viable religions. It's just not what the Buddha taught. And so there's quite a few suttas where the Buddha is engaging in the Jains in debate and trying to hopefully change their thinking to understand this. So this is the same thing. A local prince, Prince Abhaya, the Jain, Naganthanataputta. Naganthanataputta was the leader of the local Jain sect. The prince approached Naganthanataputta, bowed, and sat to one side. Naganthanataputta said to Prince Abhaya, "If you were to refute the teachings of the mighty and powerful," in quotes, they're mocking the Buddha, "if you would refute the teachings of the mighty and powerful Gautama the contemplative, then an admirable reputation of you will spread far." Think about that one statement. This is a local leader of a prominent religion. And he's saying that it would be very skillful for you to do something that is hurtful to another human being. And because it would increase the prince's reputation, which would also increase Naganthanataputta's reputation, it's okay. Don't even think twice about it.
And also, the idea of increasing your reputation is a view and is unskillful there in itself.
Certainly rooted in eye-making.
And it's impermanent, so
Yep.
it has no value.
Yeah, but the reason why this is significant is the whole rest of the sutta follows that type of thinking. To some people, that would even sound reasonable, wouldn't it? Especially if really what you're thinking about is promoting this wonderful religion. The prince had, up until that point, he thought this was something that would be useful to spread. He was well-intentioned in what he was doing. And so in a very subtle way, Nagantha was preying on his compassionate though fabricated view. You'll become a great Jain teacher if you can just refute the Buddha in debate, as a reasonable thing to do. Venerable Sir, Prince Abhaya says, how will I refute the teachings of the mighty and powerful Gautama? Come now, Prince. Gautama the contemplative is at the squirrel sanctuary in the bamboo forest near Rajagaha. When you see him, ask him this. Would you say words that are not endearing or are disagreeable to others? Again, notice what they're focusing on. That what determines a useful teaching is whether you find it agreeable or disagreeable. How fabricated or foolish would that be? But yet, they're putting it out there as the most important thing.
And it's the only thing that anybody ever looks at, whether it's agreeable or disagreeable.
It makes me feel good. Or all of my associates agree, so it must be right, it must be good, it must be wholesome. You know? And as you'll see, that doesn't fit in with a proper way to teach the Dhamma and or ask and answer questions. If he answers that he would say words that are not endearing or are disagreeable to others, then you should say to him, then how is there any difference between you and any ordinary run-of-the-mill person? However, if Gautama the contemplative answers that he would not say words that are not endearing or disagreeable to others, then you say to him, then why did you say that Devadatta is headed for deprivation, a living hell, beyond redemption? Devadatta was very upset at these words. Devadatta was a cousin of the Buddha who twice had tried to kill the Buddha, and he came pretty close on both of those occasions. And so much so that in the sutta, the Buddha uses Devadatta in Devadatta's presence within the sangha, pointing out how Devadatta's ignorance led to such hurtful behavior, and he concludes that sutta by saying, and Devadatta is headed now for basically a living hell. And so that was an exercise by the Buddha in right speech. Many people would say, well, how it hurt his feelings. The greater good is served by maintaining the Dhamma, isn't it? And authenticity to the Dhamma. And it would even be cruel in that situation to couch his words so that Devadatta felt okay with what he did. He's only encouraging Devadatta's continued ignorance, isn't he? So being agreeable and endearing to Devadatta in that situation would have been the cruelest thing that he could have done. Does everybody see that? And equally as cruel to the rest of the Sangha. Because then they're getting the impression that the most important thing about Buddhism is that it makes you feel good, or that you agree with it. When we know as practitioners that it challenges us at the very core of our being, doesn't it? Of course, that very core is fabricated, like foam on the ocean. But if we don't have the courage and the conviction to see it that way, there's no Dhamma. When you ask Gautama the contemplative this two-pronged question, he won't be able to swallow it or spit it out. It will be as if he swallowed a two-horned chestnut that became stuck in his throat. Again, think about this is a so-called spiritual or religious teacher that's hoping that one of his students will do this to another human being, and that it's okay. Because if you can prove my views are right, it doesn't matter if other people suffer, does it? That's what he's saying. And there's some incredible examples of that throughout human history. The Crusades and modern jihads are just one of them. They're justified because we're saving savages, isn't it? Doesn't matter how much they suffer. It's the same kind of thinking. Rooted in what? Ignorance. Prince Abhaya responds, as you say, Lord. He left Naganta Nataputta with respect and went to the Buddha. On arrival, he bowed and sat to one side. As the prince was sitting with the Buddha, he had this thought, this is not the time or place to confront Gautama the contemplative. I will invite him to my house and refute his words there, meaning he's going to come to a place where he's in charge. Great teacher, would you join me with 3 of your Sangha members for tomorrow's meal? The Buddha accepted his offer by his silence. It's another teaching that it was understood that if you didn't say anything, you were agreeing to what was proposed, but it's also a very subtle and not all that significant teaching on right speech. There was nothing to be said. The Buddha agreed, so he sat there. The Buddha accepted the offer by his silence. The prince left with a show of respect. The next day, the Buddha adjusted his inner robe and took his alms bowl and an outer robe and left for Prince Abhaya's home. Upon arrival, he sat on a seat prepared for him. Prince Abhaya served the Buddha and his friends a lavish meal. The Buddha finished his meal and removed his hand from his bowl just to signify that he's done with his meal. The prince then sat on a lower seat to one side of the Buddha and addressed the Buddha. Would you say words that are not endearing or disagreeable? How do you think the Buddha would respond to that when asked that question? Nobody knows the answer to that. But if you read the article or heard the talk, you can't. What would you say if someone said, would you say words to others that are not endearing or disagreeable? It sounds like you would immediately answer, well, I would never say anything that's not endearing to others or that they might find disagreeable. Sounds like a reasonable response, isn't it? Unless you have the proper framework and understanding of the nature of suffering rooted in ignorance. Because when it continues ignorance, it's cruel and it just leads to more, doesn't it? And you also should remember that this is a sutta primarily about how to teach the Dhamma. So as we're engaged in mundane talk, I won't go so far as to say idle chatter, it's also important to remember what this teaching is giving us. That even in our mundane moment by moment life, it's often not helpful to just make people feel good, but that's our natural inclination, isn't it? Rather than being mindful and standing within the framework of the Eightfold Path in a truly compassionate mind rooted in wisdom.
And that's totally like on the top driven. It's totally ego driven. You're just looking for comfort. It's got really very little to do with the other person. Trying to somehow put yourself up or avoid something that's unpleasant or, garner something that's pleasant, which is all vedana and impermanent and not to be considered as something skillful to engage in.
And you'll get a lot of people. I'm not talking just about Dhamma. You'll get a lot of friends because people will say, "Boy, that made me feel good."
Yeah, maybe, but in truth, you actually end up being more disconnected.
You do.
Because you're insincere, and people begin to pick up on that, and you suffer, and you get the opposite of what you're looking for is perhaps some genuine connection.
We have
just go about it in the ignorant way.
Yeah, we have a common term for it. I just lost
It's called Mora.
No. Geez, I just lost the phrase.
Wasn't that common?
Yeah, it is though. It is.
Confirmation bias?
Flattery.
No.
Yes, it's flattery. It's all that solicitous, saccharine, not all of it, but it depends because it's context driven and is it helpful, etc. But
The word I'm looking for is tough love, and we're just it's usually misapplied, or it certainly doesn't have the framework of the Eightfold Path, but it takes a certain amount of courage, and as you'll see, it also takes an understanding of what you're talking about. All this teaching doesn't do anybody much good if you don't understand what's behind it, and that'll become clear. The Buddha responds, there is no categorical yes or no answer to your questions. And I explain what that means. Well, Gautama, you have just refuted the Nagantas. The Jain religion is what he's saying. Just yesterday, Naganta Nataputta told me to find you and ask if you would use words that are not endearing or are disagreeable. He said you would choke on the answer as if you had swallowed a two-horned chestnut. At that time, a baby was lying in the prince's lap. The Buddha asked Prince Abhaya, if this baby was neglected and swallowed a piece of gravel, what would you do? I would remove it. If I could not remove it easily, I would hold his head with one hand and reach into the baby's throat to remove the stone. And the actual two different translations that I read, it goes on to a pretty gruesome depiction of even if I had to rip the baby's throat and cause I don't remember the word that they use, but gallons of blood, because it would save the baby's life. And again, the metaphor is important. Sometimes living in reality is painful. It doesn't feel good. And that's okay, because you might save your life doing it. The Prince of Abhaya continues, this may hurt the baby, but would save his life. I would do this out of sympathy for the baby. We all would, wouldn't we? In the same way, out of sympathy for others, the Buddha continues, in the same way, out of sympathy for others, words that I know to be false, unendearing, disagreeable, or not helpful in developing the Dhamma, I do not say them. False, unendearing, disagreeable, or not helpful. Keep your mouth shut. That's an aspect of noble silence. And this is something that is important. I think you're all gaining a better understanding of this. It's why I run the retreats the way I run retreats, because there cannot be noble silence unless it's informed by right speech. Does everybody know that? Understand what I'm saying? Everybody? Why, Kevin? Put you on the spot. I don't mean to. Do you really have, if you don't have the answer, just give me a look and I'll go on a second.
You said noble silence can't be informed.
Can only be informed by right speech, or supported is another way of saying it. Knowing when to hold your tongue, when to remain silent, is noble silence. Just agreeing to a period, whether it's 10 minutes or a month of not talking, there's nothing noble about that. I'm not to say that you might find value in it. It's simply not something that is a practice of right speech. Noble silence, truly noble silence, needs right speech to support it, or else it's what? It's just silence.
If it's forced, then it's just another rite or ritual.
Yeah, and again, many people find, for whatever reason, not talking for hours or weeks or months enjoyable, or at least they see it as beneficial, mostly because of the way it's framed. I did too. I couldn't understand why I've been sitting in meditation for 12, 14 hours a day for 10 days, and I'm just glad it's over. I didn't find anything else of any value in that. And most people feel the same way. And again, that's fine. If you want to spend a period of your life in silence, that's fine. But it's simply not noble silence unless it's informed by right speech. Frank, did you have your hand up? In the same way, out of sympathy for others, words that I know to be true, but likewise unendearing, disagreeable, and or not helpful, I could say and not helpful, in developing the Dhamma, I do not say them. So just because something is true is no reason to spat it out. I'm just saying what's true without thinking about how it's affecting other people. And it doesn't lead to developing the Dhamma. So just because something is truthful doesn't mean that it supports Dhamma practice. And a rather ridiculous but I think meaningful example would be if I explained to you as part of Dhamma class the intricacies of changing the oil in my car. If I frame it as important part of Dhamma practice and you want to believe everything that comes out of this fool's mouth, you're going to integrate that as part of your Dhamma practice, aren't you? But it's not, and it would be cruel to teach it that way, or anything else. For me to understand, or from the Buddhist standpoint, to teach something that sounds agreeable and endearing, but it doesn't lead to the goal, is wrong speech. In the same way, out of sympathy for others, words that I know to be true, unendearing, disagreeable, but helpful in developing the Dhamma, with a sense of the proper time, I do say them. You see the qualification? If the situation is proper, it doesn't matter if my words are unendearing or disagreeable, because the qualification is that they're truthful, meaning they're related to Four Noble Truths, and they will help continue developing the Dhamma. And does everybody understand why disagreeable or not agreeable really has no relevance here? The qualification is that it's true and that it will be helpful. Just being truthful is not enough of a qualification to open my mouth. A good example would be modern politics today. And so I can say that so-and-so is awful, what a terrible human being. Notice I'm not picking one person or another. It's a truthful statement, isn't it? But if we start evolving into who are all the people that are not so pleasant in the world, this is not Dhamma practice anymore, is it? So it might be true that a person is not helpful, but to go in, to take that to the level of hatred, even though it might seem justifiable, is an extension of that initial wrong view. And now I'm agitated. Now I might be part of a crowd that thinks that it's okay to do some violence to a person or other people. Do you see how it builds out of ignorance? And the initial focus for that exaggeration of emotion was that I talked myself and other people into saying, I agree with this. It's agreeable. And it's true. But it doesn't lead to the Dhamma. Am I making my point? This is it is at that reason that we have conflict in the world. And if we could understand that one thing, we had a great talk. If we could understand that, I mean, everybody, there'd be no reason for conflict because we would understand how hurtful it is, that it's unnecessary. But if I start living my life from the point of view of anatta, meaning I'm only chasing after what makes me feel good and I don't want anything that might take away from that, I'm stuck in looking for what's only agreeable and endearing to me. And if a Dhamma practice at times is not endearing or appealing because of where we have to go with it, I don't want anything to do with it. And teaching it, we have to be willing, even if it's just in conversation, in the right situation, to maintain that courage and fidelity to the Dhamma, or at least to our own Dhamma practice. Is that clear? So we can avoid getting entangled in the world if we lose the need to make other people feel good all the time. And we'll do that easily when we understand that making people feel good is like putting a lobster in a pot of cold water and turning up the heat. You don't notice that you're keeping yourself in that boiling pot of ignorance because it feels good, because you've cooled it down a little bit with the agreeable views. Hurtful. It continues, in the same way, out of sympathy for others, words that I know to be false, not helpful in developing the Dhamma, but are endearing and agreeable. Let me say that again. Words that I know to be false, not helpful in developing the Dhamma, but are endearing and agreeable. What do you think the Buddha would say? Does he continue?
Speak.
Pardon me?
I do not speak then.
Anybody else want to vote on this? Offer your opinion? Words that are false, not helpful, but they're endearing and agreeable.
If they don't lead to relinquishment, if they don't lead to dispassion and disenchantment, then you do not lead to the goal.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Somebody's been listening to this.
Is everybody following me? I mean, this isn't, there's a lot of words, but the point we're trying to make here?
Not being truthful. You can just stop, because however it goes, positive or negative, it starts with, if it's not true, then Buddha would never say.
Yes. And take that one step further, personalize it a little bit. Personalize Dhamma practice. There's so much freedom. Larry, we had a great talk. We should have just had the talk and let that be the class. But the tension and the inner conflict of always maintaining lies is awful. And yet many of us do it. I'm not talking about the huge lies, but just a fabricated view of self is a lie, isn't it? It takes so much stress, takes so much energy. It takes almost a constant vigilance to maintain this fabricated view of self. Why do we think we lose our minds over? Why do we talk about having developed this monkey mind? We just can't quiet it down. How can it be that we are human beings, it's our mind, and yet we can't, without some help, quiet it initially? Because we're so caught up in that I-making, getting what I want, making myself in this moment, I need to feel good. And honestly, most of us don't know what feeling good is. It's just that's an abstract too, isn't it? It's a developed concept of what feels good. Does everybody understand that?
Yes.
Yeah.
1 piece of chocolate cake is great. 10 pieces of chocolate cake feels 10 times as good, but it's hurtful, isn't it? Just because something feels good is and this takes us right back to the 4 foundations of mindfulness. We begin by being mindful of the breath in the body, then be mindful that feelings simply arise and pass away. There's no substance to them. Thoughts arise and pass away. So why do I need everything to be agreeable to me? Why do I have to be involved in judging whether things are agreeable or disagreeable in this moment?
Ignorance.
There's the freedom of not having to concern myself with it. Knowing that, talking Larry, for the early part of my life, that's not true. For the first, at least for many years of my life, I was a person that I literally, I knew everything there was to know in the world. I was, if you looked up expert in the dictionary, there was my picture. Just kidding. I believed I knew everything there was. And if I didn't know it, I would make something up and insist that you believe it, even though I knew it wasn't true. What a way to live. What an awful way to live. What great freedom now to know that for the most part, I know that I don't have to worry about lies because I don't lie. There's nothing to, there's not this underlying tension. There was a time in my life when I was afraid to answer the telephone or open a piece of mail. Literally, the mailbox at the end of my street, I was living in Holland Township at the time, the mail carrier knocked on my door one day and he said, I'm just checking that there's somebody living in this house anymore. Because he looked at my mailbox, it was just piled with stuff outside of the box because that was all they could do with it. I was so worried in my mind, so closed in, so narrowly focused that I couldn't even open up a piece of mail. Clinically that's called extreme paranoia, but it was also an extremely self-centered point of view, wasn't it? An extremely self-referential point of view. And the reason why I couldn't answer the phone or open up a piece of mail is because all the lies I had out there, they built up to the point where I couldn't manage them anymore. And look at the contrast to not having any out there anymore. At least I don't think I do. I'll get one to more before, but that's okay. The Buddha teaches that the culmination of all this, of the Eightfold Path, is not a big pot of gold. It's not having an incredible lifetime in the future. In fact, it's not about getting much of anything right now, except what is most valuable, a mind of lasting peace and happiness. To anatta, to a self-referential ego self, that doesn't sound like much, does it? Because it wants more. It always wants more. Even if it got a peaceful and calm mind, it wouldn't be enough, it wouldn't last. But that's the greatest gift, isn't it? I think we understand that. And so we can have this incredible life, and we can really do just about within reason, mostly anything we want, moment by moment in our lives. And I'm never going to play center field for the Yankees, probably. They're still holding out hope. But by and large, every day of my life, I can do what I want. And anybody can. I don't have some extraordinary freedom. But for a long time in my life, I didn't do anything that I wanted to. I did everything my ego wanted to, and I chased all that stuff. And at times, my life seemed incredible. I remember telling myself I was living the American dream when I was gritting my teeth because I was so worried about everything. This is wonderful. Look at it. I got this nice house, this wonderful bride, new wife. Business is great. And I can't sleep at night. And I'm screaming and hollering at everybody. And even that, I still remember how, as there was a time in my life when my business was pretty good. And it seemed like I felt worse as my bank account got bigger. And I couldn't figure it out. I look at it now and I realize that I was starting to build this, what I thought was a pot of gold. And that my own personal pot of gold could never be big enough. I always had to keep throwing more gold on top. It's just tiring. And as you engage in the Dhamma and you start realizing that a person is Any human being has 6 properties and nothing else. There's nothing that can change any human being. We're all the same in that way. Why bother? And why lie about it? Or why lie about anything else in this world? Why? Because of fabrications. A fabrications is a lie, isn't it? And it causes us to live a lie. It causes us to engage in wrong speech, even speech that might seem reasonable to make someone else feel better, but it doesn't lead to the goal. And this is the brilliance of Siddhartha Gautama, to see that. Remember, he left his palace to understand the nature of suffering. That was his motivation. So he wasn't too concerned about more. He wanted to understand something much more basic than more. He wanted to understand who he was. And he figured it out. And he realized, remember it in the Abhaya Sutta, he figured it out by understanding what he was caught up in, this feedback loop of fabricated views, rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, stuck in this loop of consciousness rooted in that initial ignorance. How do you get yourself out of it? This is the way. By seeing things clearly. An aspect of living an authentic, integrated life with the Eightfold Path is just this. This is what the Buddha is describing here. In the same way, out of sympathy for others, words that I know to be true, endearing, and agreeable, but are not helpful in developing the Dhamma. What do you think the Buddha does with you can't talk? You hear what they are? They're endearing, agreeable, and true, but they're not helpful. What do we do with that?
Yeah, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah. And so we can apply that to a lot of the interactions in our lives, can we?
Most of them.
Most of them, yeah.
But only
And-
when you refine mindfulness that you can have that control of your mind.
Yes, and that's rooted in concentration.
That's without it.
That's why the Buddha taught meditation for concentration, because we need a well-concentrated mind to support that refined mindfulness to do just this. Another way of saying this is to remain disentangled from the world.
You can be in the world and talking, but be disentangled. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So you have seclusion, although you're still engaging.
Yes, that's the. Thanks for using that word too, seclusion. Lorna was talking about this too. The seclusion that we establish on our mat. And this is what the Buddha means when he's talking about seclusion. We establish it. What are you doing?
Oh, the six sense gates. We're seeing what's arising in the six sense gates, but we're not clinging to those objects.
Yes. We establish seclusion on our cushion, but we take that seclusion, that well-secluded mind, off our cushion and out into the world. So I think I used the time. We could be in the middle of Times Square or any other busy place, but we remain secluded, disentangled from that. Why? Because we have gained control of our minds. We don't lose our minds to all the neon lights and everything else going around. We don't lose our minds because we have concentration. We have developed jhana. And even the descriptions of jhana that the Buddha gives, the different levels of jhana, result in a calm and peaceful mind. That's the highest achievement, by the way. There's nothing beyond that, except the self-referential ego self would say, what? Got to be something beyond calm and peace until you experience it. In the same way, out of sympathy for others, words that I know to be true, endearing, and agreeable, but not helpful in developing the Dhamma, I do not say them. So the simple criteria, is it helpful towards people? And not necessarily within the Dhamma, although when we're teaching the Dhamma, it should be that way. But even in life in general, is what I'm saying to someone, is it really helpful? And sometimes it is helpful to give somebody a hug and say it's okay. That I'm not saying that, because that helps somebody get from one moment to the next. In that moment, it's important to be an example of the Dhamma, though, in that you're not getting caught up in what the other person is, or you really can't be helpful. This might be I run into that situation a lot in working with compulsive and addictive people, very desperate early in recovery. And so that it's important to stay, even Bonnie would understand, and I think anybody in therapy, that you keep like a professional distance there. You don't get too involved in people. With, pardon me? Yeah. It's kind of like that, but you're using the framework of the Dhamma to be compassionate, but with wisdom. And this is helpful in any situation that we have. In the same way, out of sympathy for others, words that I know to be true, endearing, and agreeable, and are helpful in developing the Dhamma, guess what? With a sense of the proper time or the proper situation, I do say them. So they're truthful, they're endearing, they're agreeable, and it leads to developing the Dhamma. Then it's something to open our mouth about. You know, in a practical way, we don't have to point somebody to the, like, you don't have to point out somebody else's right speech to encourage them towards right speech. In other words, it's just as inappropriate for me to teach somebody dependent origination when they're having a bad day, to explain it to them. They're not going to be very happy that I just called them an ignorant fool, are they? Because they're not going to, there's no context for understanding that. But to spend a little time with someone who's in distress, let them understand or see that I'm not riled by that. I'm not entangled in their mess, can often lead then to, this is what I would do. But a person has to be ready. And if you know they're not ready to hear it, sometimes all you can do is give them a pat on the back. Lord, this is the Prince again. Lord, when others have questions for you and approach you, do you know how you will answer, or do you formulate a response in the moment? Again, the Buddha is asking, do you respond from a conditioned mind? Meaning you already know what you're going to say? Or is your mind free enough to understand what's occurring in the moment? What an important question, isn't it? The Buddha says, I will counter question you, Prince. Answer how you see fit. Are you skilled in the parts of a chariot? Yes, I am skilled in the parts of a chariot, said the Prince. Well, Prince, when people ask you about the parts of a chariot, do you know how you will answer, or do you formulate a response in the moment? Great teacher, I am known as an expert in the parts of a chariot. As such, I formulate a response in the moment. Well, Prince Abhaya, in the same manner, when others question me, I formulate a response in the moment, and I formulate a response in the moment because I thoroughly understand the Dhamma. If we want to truly be helpful to other people, this is why you hear me say it often. The most loving thing I can do for myself and for everyone else is to take to the Dhamma and awaken. And that's the reason why. So when the opportunity to pass on something truly useful, I'll be able to. And I think every one of you here has been able to experience that, haven't you?
Yes.
Isn't it remarkable? When we're able, and it really is, it's nothing extraordinary, but it is being mindfully present with another human being. The Buddha taught a way to unite the mind and the body and keep it there. And when my mind is united with my body, then I can be present with you. But when I'm thinking of something else, I'm nowhere. And that often leads into conflict. At the very least, it's going to lead to a lack of understanding between two people just because you're not present with each other. When this was said, Prince Abhaya replied, magnificent, Lord, magnificent. It is as if you have set upright what was overturned, revealed what was hidden. And think about this. Now, 2,600 years ago, and we're hearing these same words today. Prince Abhaya is a stern, that's not the right word. He's a follower of the Jain sect. He believes in it. He's been conditioned by it. And yet he hears these simple and direct words. And the light went on. He understood. Notice the Buddha didn't defend himself. He didn't attack the prince in any direct way. He simply spoke about the Dhamma. And every word that he uses is framed by developing understanding. That's one of the most remarkable things I've come across reading the suttas. The Buddha never wasted a word. Think about you know, the teaching on right speech and idle chatter and all the nonsense that's out there. Every single word is a useful word. It means something. Overturned, revealed what was hidden, shown a clear path. I'm going to make an edit there. Sorry. A clear path to one lost, and you've carried a lamp in the darkness for those with eyes to see. Through many lines of reasoning, you have made the Dhamma clear. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, just like we do. And what does that mean? Again, we talk about that often. You can't take refuge in something except unless that place is established. We couldn't take refuge in a Dhamma if it wasn't truly established, would it? It wouldn't be a refuge. It would just be another abstract place, be another Disneyland. But because because a human being awakened, we can take refuge in that true refuge, not something mystical or magical. And again, this is one of those great revelations, because to me, until I read the suttas, the Buddha was a god, and he was a god among many gods, and so inaccessible. An inhuman, a supernatural Buddha, establishing a supernatural Buddha, establishing something that me as a natural human being can't ever accomplish, can I? But that's not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha always held himself out as a normal human being. He taught a Dhamma for other human beings to develop, and he taught the importance of a well-focused sangha. We have all three going for us. There's no reason why we can't awaken by the end of tonight. So let's get to it. The prince continues. Well, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and his Sangha. Remember me as a follower from this day forward. He got him. He got another one. Thank you. That's the end of the sutta. The simple guidance that's given in this sutta is really remarkable. And I'm saying this, so I hope you spend a little time, maybe reread it or listen to this talk again, because it really is important. One of the things that comes up here often is how do we talk about it to others? This is how we talk about it to others. It's how we do it. If what you have to say is truthful and it leads to this towards the cessation of ignorance, then say it. It's just to make people feel good. It's best to keep your mouth shut, because we're often only furthering ignorance. And I think we all know that there can be nothing more cruel than furthering someone's ignorance, can there be? You don't have to agree with me. Do you all agree with me on that statement? Because I say it often.
Yes.
Again, it's okay if you don't. In fact, if you don't, I'd like to hear it. And I'll ask you to leave. No. Really, I mean,
I don't think I could hold to that all the time.
Well, wait, do you understand it first? Yeah. Well, holding to it is another thing.
Yeah, you're asking, well, is it better to keep silent than say something to make somebody feel good? I could hold to that all the time.
Yeah, I think we need to be a little bit, maybe I need to be a little more clear. In a normal conversation, we should be agreeable to other people. We should speak in an agreeable way. But when it's taken to the point where we're misleading people because of our need, my need, to make you feel good, it's not the other person. It's knowing yourself well enough that I'm saying something now only to make somebody feel good. And usually the underlying motivation for that, usually on the surface, I'm just trying to be helpful. But usually the underlying motivation for that is to build me up.
That's
I have the exact opposite problem
What's that, Frank?
of telling people what I think, telling the truth in not so helpful ways. And by coming here, I've learned to hold my tongue on it and still come around to the truth.
Yeah.
But in more of, I think they said, an endearing way, to be more helpful, to guide people towards the Dhamma, to creating your own without coming out and saying, yo, stupid, you're making your own suffering. Like, you know what I mean? Like, be less abrasive and more compassionate.
Yeah. And so you developed right speech. And I bet you, even in the practical way at Stock's Bakery, it's changed a lot of, at least your interactions with others, haven't it?
Are we trying to make him feel good?
Yeah.
It definitely has created better relationships.
Yeah.
But now I have another problem because now people think I want to listen to them. And I really don't.
We call that the jewels of elephant face. And
Well,
Buddha was known as like the elephant face. And then if you have that elephant face, you realize there's a lot of people that come around to it.
you need to develop a skillful scowl.
No, I mean, I'm present with them.
No, I know.
And I don't.
And
I
people
don't try to
respond.
rehearse anything to say to people. I just kind of like that last verse or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm with them.
And that's why they want to talk to you.
Or the whatever, I'm hearing them. And,
Yeah.
I refrain from offering suggestions or whatever. Just, you know.
Yeah. Right speech. Ram, you had something?
No.
No? Maura, you had?
You know, I was going to say, like kind of what you had mentioned is if we examine, if I examine my motivation from moment to moment about what is motivating what I'm going to say, if what I'm going to say is endearing and it's motivated by me wanting to hold on to I'm a good and generous person, that I'm magnanimous or any view, that's where that's where the mind needs to focus. To me, it really, and as the Buddha points out in the sutta, you can't give a definitive answer on that. It is moment by moment. I may say to you, "That's a wonderful shirt," and I may say that at a different time, and in some way of ingratiating you or wanting you to think that I'm always kind or something I won't say. I'll give you a ride simply because I can't stand the fact that you may think of me as stingy. So those are all these very self-centered, self-referential, I-making, extremely detrimental to my own well-being. I'm like my own liberation, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm just reinforcing something that is dukkha. So why would though I do it,
Yep.
but I'm becoming more and more acutely aware of checking.
That's it. That's practicing the Dhamma at the point of contact.
Mhm.
We're learning within the Dhamma how to live in the world. The fact that a lot of the world isn't, that's okay. We understand the nature of the world because we understand the first noble truth. The stress and suffering and disappointing experience in the world can't be any different than they are. Why is that? Why? There's the answer you should never ask. There's no why. There's no explanation. As Dhamma practitioners, this is what it is. The Buddha awakened and he looked out on the world and said, the world is a flame. A flame with what? A flame with the fires of passion, which is the same as saying the fires of ignorance. He didn't say that there's a way to fix it. He never set himself out as a savior. He just said, this is the reality. Understand it and don't take any of it personal. And you can live this way, free, meaning free of the need to even speak in ways that isn't helpful towards others.
We're gonna roll.
Good to see you, Eric. You got anything to say before you run?
Nice to meet you.
Take care.
Take care, bud.
You too. I was just going to say that, talking about rate of speech, I find that, I can see a lot of my own suffering, when it comes to right speech, in the context that it's explained in here, where my speech isn't right, it shows the things that I do.
Yep, that's right.
And, my own hangings, I would say.
Yeah.
And when you were talking earlier about noble silence and how noble being silent, what noble silence really is. I don't know. I just found that interesting.
Yeah.
How you can get attached to I don't know.
Yeah. That's the whole Dhamma there, isn't it? Things in your head. That's and so we go from really uncontrolled way of thinking to developing control over our thoughts. That's what a concentrated mind is.
And what a gift.
Yeah, what an incredible gift, and you're developing it just as it should be. There's nothing difficult about right speech is honest. It's not divisive. It's not abusive. It's free of gossip, and it's free of idle chatter. Also, with another component of not idle chatter is that it's necessary. That meaning that what I'm saying will be helpful. That's why I say this when I ask you, and I know some of you gets annoying. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because I need to know. Because if you don't understand what I'm saying, we could spend more time at the Mexican restaurant. We don't need to be here, So, and this works. It's an aspect of my right speech to know that what I'm saying is actually useful to you. It's one if I think that it's useful, but the Dhamma is not like that. It's not a double refuge. If I can explain this right, or I'm really going to get lost. It's not a double refuge. It's a triple refuge. There's no Dhamma without the Buddha, the Dhamma, and a well-informed and well-focused sangha. That's why this works for us. It's not because you have the most brilliant teacher in the world. You're lucky you do. It works. It works because we practice the Dhamma. Our retreats work because we practice the Dhamma. It shouldn't even be surprising that it works, should it? It works. And you're developing that. Glad you made it tonight. Thanks, Frank. Glad you made it.
Thank
you, Frank.
See you soon.
Frank, when you use that multiple times a day.
Okay. Start getting another one.
See you, my friends. Matt, what do you got to say for yourself?
Good to see you. Thank you for bringing out this teaching and sharing this with us. So
I was almost going to ask you, are you practicing noble silence? Thank you for giving us the heads up on this. Lorna, good night.
Thank you. Teaching on right speech is always useful. There's so many ways you can look at it, and it's with us all the time, every minute of the day that we're thinking, and so it's always should be something that's we should become very familiar with. Just to say that you can look at it in the sense of Buddha looking at it, but you can also say that it's very supportive within the sangha for us each to have right speech.
Yep.
Among ourselves. And if you hold with compassion and right speech, you can each support each other in the sangha.
Yeah, that's right. And if you didn't, you couldn't, could you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's something not ever to, get fluffy around the edges with, because it really quite essential to the Dhamma. Otherwise, everything will fall apart.
Yep.
So it's really important, and even if you, if you follow the right speech with compassion, you can talk to other Sangha members, sort of very delicate situations, and it's okay, it's not offensive, etc. So it's always important to uphold.
Thank you. And when you're engaged in right speech, you can talk about anything. Things that might even be terribly embarrassing to the other person. When you're mindfully present, it's often surprising to me that some of the things that people say to me. And again, I'm not the role, but they're comfortable enough to say these things to me. What a gift that is, that people feel that way. I mean, really, to me, it's never a burden, even though people have put some pretty heavy things on just by what they said. What an incredible thing. That's true connection with people. It's not entanglement. Thank you. Kevin, I wanted to ask you, in light of tonight's talk and your experience during retreat about developing right speech, do you see how these questions were what we use, not just me, all of us, in how we interacted with each other on retreat, and to have that opportunity to actually practice right speech rather than just be enforced silence? It's, I mean, you can't even compare the two, can you? How much more effective it is in developing a Dhamma. So what would you say about that? You're not going to keep putting Kevin on the spot.
The wisdom of restraint. It's just, it's, you know, like we've said, it's the beginning point of the Dhamma, but it's, you know, it's the Dhamma. And, you know, there's a lot of aspects to that speech. You know, it's, you know, having the restraint to not think something or say something internally or then say it out and, you know, have to say it all the time. So you can, it's almost like, you know, seeing from awakened right view is almost like looking down on yourself, you know, like you're in a helicopter. You know, would that be wise to say that?
Yeah. And you have that perspective.
Yeah. And oftentimes, probably more often than it used to be, since we've all undertaken practice, you're going to find yourself probably saying a lot less. And where you think you'd say something, you can just sit quietly. You can say what you were going to say as it evolves. Maybe two moments later, you'll instead of trying to say it right then, you know, and there's something there.
Yeah.
You can still say what you, if it's going to add, you know, it's going to really benefit.
Yeah.
Practice the restraint, and you may find that it won't, so you won't say it. There's just more to, you know, understanding with restraint, I think.
Yeah, that's the magic. You know, the next two chapters of the Dhammapada are both going to be on restraint, so you might want to check it out when I get to them the next 2 Thursdays. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I mean that's what the Buddha's teaching here too, in every one of those different categories. He's talking about the restraint. Here's where I act, and here's where I don't act. Restraint. But it's informed by understanding what he's talking about. Wow, good to see you.
Great to hear. Timely. Just over the weekend, I met with an old friend of mine that I knew from my days with Osho, and you know, he's still very much involved in that. At one point, he asked me if I still felt this strong heart connection to the Guru, and I did a quick check with the right speech there, and because I know he struggles with it, and I also know he's not
your friend.
Yeah, my friend. Yeah. He's not a very easy person to be around. And I finally said, no, I don't feel that at all. It's been decades.
What an example of right speech.
Yeah. But I had to carefully check my feelings there. Because I kind of felt he was kind of putting me on the spot there.
Oh,
he was basically because he was, you know, being very differential to me. You know, I've been there longer, and you know, all that stuff. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't acting out of kind of spite there. And I have to say, in the answer, no, I don't feel that anymore. I haven't for a long time. Miss the old sangha because that part did a lot for me. But as far as that connection with the Guru, that's always been kind of missing. And there was a couple of more. Luckily, in the rest of all the conversations, my son was there too, who has a different connection with him than I do. And we did get to, I did bring in like how I live with Dhamma and how it's working for me. So in the end, I managed to be there, framed in the Dhamma.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
And it may not have occurred, but at least you were an example of what you've developed over time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And especially because my son was there. I was very, and we've had a really contentious relationship. That also made me very careful as to what came out of my mouth in that whole situation.
Yeah. That level of restraint is not something that Anatta wants, does it? To not say whatever comes to mind, really.
Yeah. And it also, it set me back up as to, why I want to be in teacher training, because I do want to be able to clearly bring out, like, this is why I'm doing this, why I'm here.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. For all those teacher trainings too. Yeah, this is an important part of that. Thank you. Let me go to Jane. Give Jane a chance before. Hey, Jane.
John,
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Did you enjoy tonight's sutta?
I did.
I
Because I am working through, I thought it was my goal in life to make other people feel better and to take them.
Yeah.
And it didn't really help anybody, and I was getting more stressed out. So I'm working on developing my own, a calm mind. And I think I'll be able to actually be of more help when my mind is calm.
Wow. Well said. And that's really cool. Like, again, it's the same as saying the most loving thing we can do is to take to the Dhamma and awaken. So, thank you, Jane. How are you, Russ? Hello, Russ. Oh, he doesn't look like he's there. Russ? No, he's left the room. Okay. Or good to see him. Glad you made it tonight.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Larry, for being the impetus to get my butt upriver.
And cross river.
Right. Crossing up, yes. Yeah, it's great to be here. I said a lot already, so. But this is, as just echoing what everyone's saying, it's such a powerful, concrete opportunity to examine the state of our mind.
Yeah.
And to change and cultivate that which reduces suffering. Absolutely. And I appreciate the you had said in a recent conversation, I think about this, the idea of meeting people where they're at, and the Buddha was fabulous example of meeting people where they're at, that chariot example, just that's kind of what I was saying, like, just his skill in using what's going to be helpful is just always blows me away. Yeah. So I've seen it referred to in the suttas in some way that this encouragement, this gentle encouragement that we give each other is a skillful means. This way, your example of you give somebody a pat on the back, or you encourage them, you tell them, you point out, make much of what is good, because that will further the Dhamma. Because if somebody doesn't feel safe around you, they may not be able, because we're meeting them where they're at. So it's very deliberate and intentional sometimes to say something very kind and supportive of somebody, because your intention is to establish a relationship so you can be of use and of benefit to yourself and others. It's not about am I a good person and I'm going to teach you the Dhamma. It's really recognizing that internal and external mindfulness of is my mind correct, and we're in this together, and everything that I do is got the same amount of impact on me as it has on you. So it becomes very clear that piece, if my intention is wrong, I'm going to suffer as much as you're going to suffer. So, or may suffer, and the piece of somebody said it is, the more that I truly see the impermanence of like the worldly winds and feelings and perceptions, and I know that those things only cause me suffering, I don't feel the need. It's a natural result is that I'm not going to do as consistently as I used to. Try to make you happy or be afraid of you being upset, because I know that's just all foam on the ocean. Like it has no substance. And the only thing that I can possibly do is train my mind. And so therefore I'm ultimately responsible for all that. And I can't make your mind better, and you can't make my mind better, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
No.
So, right speech is just an awesome way of being able to see that as an impulse. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Maura. You're right. The Buddha mastered meeting people where they are in every situation. You can see that in every sutta. But one of the most significant ways that he did that is he always held himself out as a human being, a superhuman being. And just to use that as an example, when you set yourself up as someone who is above everybody else, for one thing, that itself is rooted in ignorance. But what you're instilling a very subtle form of fear in other people when you do that. The fear that they might not be able to be like you or be acceptable to you in your godlike form. Are you following me?
Mm-hmm.
In the Abhaya Sutta, the Buddha says where there's ignorance, there's desire. Where there's desire, there's fear. We often don't notice the fear that rises out of desire, but it's the fear that I might not get what I feel I want or need in this situation, including from a so-called guru. I've had gurus in the past, and there was always. Do you remember Kenpo Carter from KTD? It was the most incredible. He was, if I would call anybody a root guru, it was Kenpo Carter. I don't, but I mean that was his significance to me at one point in my life, not all that long. But I would love to see him again. He's probably in his mid-90s now, but I think he's still alive. I probably would have heard. But he was the most remarkable, warm human being I've ever met. He gave me my vows. I still remember the ceremony. But because I didn't have an interest, eventually I lost it, in Tibetan Buddhism, he had nothing to teach me. But he was a remarkable man. But I remember going through the ceremony. In the ceremony, you go through this and that, and one by one, everybody goes up to Kenpo Carter, and were you there for when I took my vows? And they put the white, I can't remember what it's called, on your neck, and then you touch. What is it? Yes, and then you touch your head with your guru, with Kenpo Carter, and that was one of the most profound experiences I ever had. But underneath, I was touching his head, hoping he would like me. Why? Why do we? I mean, I thought about this later. Why? Because I felt that I had desire that this person approve of me, which is often how that hierarchy works. And we look for it. In fact, in many situations, you can't even consider yourself a Dhamma or engaging in the Dhamma until someone approves you. You think how ridiculous that is. But where there's desire, there's fear. And so there's very subtle ways that wrong speech can instill fear in others. That's, again,
And abuse can take place.
And well, that's what happens, doesn't it? And then the desire that's now risen to fear is used to control other people. And it all starts from that a mind rooted in ignorance and expressing itself through wrong speech, through hurtful speech. And it's at that point that we practice Dhamma. Let me just try Russ again because he popped his head up, but I see him going down. Hey, Russ. Russ. Yeah. That's not what I wanted to do. All right, if you come back on, Russ, you can talk to us.
He was making dinner for his son and son's girlfriend, and with the 3-hour time difference, it might be dinner time.
They're just
there.
eating. Well, the screen is still there, so maybe he'll come back. Good to see you, Helen.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be here with all of you, and thank you for joining us. I hope we see you here again.
Yes.
So what I've been thinking about, kind of, last week we talked about how right speech actually starts in your head, not in your mouth.
Yeah.
And how being aware of that right away gives you restraint. It's here now, it's not here yet.
Yeah.
So I've got a little time delay to get it right. And I also started thinking about how in the Eightfold Path, right speech is sandwiched between right intention and right action.
Yeah.
And there's your intention is
Yeah.
that moment in your head, and action is the moment when it comes out. And so if you can master the restraint that Kevin brought up to manage those spaces, it gives you that opportunity to know when to speak, when not to speak, when what you want to say is helpful. It gives you that moment to really think about it. And if you train yourself to not be in the habit of interrupting, because what you say is just wanting to come out, it's so much pattern of our speech these days, and you use that restraint, it also gives you that moment to decide if what you wanted to say was really that important or that much of a contribution, or was it just the random thing that popped up in your head because you have some way of connecting a number of dots to that.
Yep.
What you want to say that nobody's going to understand because you've gone 5 dots out. And they've never been there before. And so it just to use that space that restraint creates to get you from right intention to right speech to right action. It's a very I don't know. I think it's like the most graspable tool, if you are aware of it.
Yeah. So how would you describe that quality of mind that's able to do that, to be its own interlocutor?
Informed about how to determine what.
Informed by the Eightfold Path. I don't mean to put
Informed
words.
by the entire Eightfold Path about what you're going to say will be a beneficial contribution.
And the information that you've developed yourself leads to a calm and peaceful mind, a mind that actually functions. Again, there's nothing magical or mystical about that, is there? To take responsibility for the way that you think and to gain the ability, to develop the ability to be present with life as life occurs, to have a mind in its body. That's all what you're describing beautifully. Ooh. Thank you. No rush yet. Hi, Mary.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I think it's interesting what Eric said. He probably didn't complete a sentence, but it was awfully sweet to know where his head's at now and his development, because at any minute, each of us is kind of back there on our own journey. And so, even the fact that he spoke up. And anyway, I just thought it couldn't have been more genuine and reflective early stages of awareness of where right speech begins, the acknowledgement of the relationship of the thoughts in your head that are just thoughts in your head. They're not real, and up until that moment you think they are real.
Yeah.
And it kind of starts to, and to what Helen was saying, it starts with that awareness, and then it's everyday practicing and integrating it off if you're a Christian, to then actually have the direct experience of more calm and peace, and then to be stringing that along more frequently so that it becomes a more regular part of your life.
Yeah.
And to go to the point of the sangha is to be able to talk about it and to hear other people like Eric articulating what's going on in their head, how they're grasping this, is just really helpful, because I can identify where I'm using right speech or not in a different way, right? Because sort of the right and wrong for me used to be sort of more like right and wrong is when you're a child learning a faith or some religion, you know, right and wrong is, does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
where you start to learn a much more sophisticated understanding of right speech that is informed and very helpful to, and to what you were saying, more to yourself and to others, profound level. And it's an accountability within yourself as to the intention. It's a lot to think about.
And it is, because it's so profound, it's also well focused too, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that simple entry point of right speech, you know, if we can, within it, we need the framework of the Eightfold Path, but it really is at that point that we practice the Dhamma, whether it's what I'm saying to you and other people or what I'm saying to myself. And Eric has made tremendous gains in this, and to be able to say something, understand it. He's talking about practicing the Dhamma at the point of contact too. It's why you know, this underlying theme of right speech or authentic Dhamma and tea is all part of that. And it's a self-referential ego self will always say, well, what's the difference? This makes people feel good, so let's do that. You know, the reason is not because it's morally wrong, even though you could say that it is. It doesn't lead to awakening.
Right.
That's the benchmark. That's the framework for Dhamma practitioners. If we don't want to do that, we can do anything we want. But there you go. Thank you, David. Good to see you tonight. How are you?
So you have the Dhamma, and you have the sangha. And what the Buddha said after the chariot question, you have this example of this man who did it. And that's why I always keep the three jewels in my mind, because they do all go together. And it is not one segment. You can't parse it out. I'm going to work on this. So it's, again, I would say it's a elegant thinking. And what he came up with is provable. And that's what he did. In this situation, he took almost advantage of this prince who has people who follow him. And now this prince is going to go back to his people. There's an example. That didn't send a prince to do the work of a teacher. He was the example. That's why Matt was very wise to introduces.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, David. Liz, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm just going to listen tonight. There's a lot of good stuff.
I'm glad you're here. Hi, Bonnie, how are you? I'm good, thank you.
So, yeah, a lot said, and I know we're not supposed to take the Dhamma outside of the Dhamma, but so much of the Dhamma is reflected in so much of how I work. And so it's almost like there's so many parallels that occur in different ways in relationship to my livelihood.
Yeah.
You know, so in essence, it comes into like having skillful livelihood and the Dhamma, you know, and studying, especially right speech, is always, I think, been something that, you know, if you focus, it brings you to a different place, better place.
Thank you. You said that we're not to take the Dhamma out of the Dhamma?
Well, sometimes because it's the Four Noble Truths and its relationship to the Four Noble Truths. We talk about ignorance, it's in relationship to the Four Noble Truths, right? But there's so many times when it applies in so many other ways that isn't about the Dhamma. It's about living. Maybe it's about living the life. So for example, when he asked the question, the two opposing question answers, which is the right answer, is the right answer. And people get caught up with wanting to hear that answer. Yep. And I think with some of my students, in fact, they ask me, you know, this is what you need to do for this week. And then they go home and they say, well, I don't know what to do. You didn't tell me enough what to do. And I said, well, I gave you all the ingredients. Now you have to go figure something out for yourself. And they get really angry sometimes, and I get terrible evaluations even because I'm not clear. They perceive it because they have to rely on their own exploration of the assignment of how they're going to make this piece of art, how they're going to do this in order to learn to because all of this is like this idea of self-reflection. You know, so this Eightfold Path, Dhamma is like this like laser beam like example of how to have a reflective practice about yourself in the world.
Yeah.
So even though so that's, I don't know if I'm clear about when the Dhamma is not about other things in life, it's about this, but this is about that in a way.
Yeah, I use what the right word is. I talked about changing someone's oil, teaching someone. I could teach you how to change. I probably couldn't teach you how to do it because I haven't done it so long. But I could teach you how to change your oil. I could do it right here, right now in this setting, and it's not a Dhamma teaching, is it? Yeah. But I can teach that from a well-concentrated mind and the refined mindfulness of the Eightfold Path, and still teach something as practical as changing the oil in your car. So it's not a Dhamma teaching, but the teaching itself, the instruction on changing oil is framed by the Eightfold Path, isn't it? I mean, and that's so. Even in abstract or theoretical situations that we're asked to engage in, we can still engage in that abstract situation from a mind framed by the Eightfold Path.
And I think more that my mind is framed by that, I can sit with the student's anxiety about it. You're telling me what I need to do
to be able to say, you know, okay, because I can't know what is going to comfort for you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Takes a lot of courage, Bonnie.
It does. Yeah.
and then that causes stress. My husband.
It does. What I used to,
That's pretty
it's a
cool.
practice of ease and joy, but it's not for the faint of heart.
That's pretty cool.
Larry, good to see you. I'm glad you came out tonight. Thank you for doing that.
Glad I came too. I knew I would be. Yeah, I had read this before, and in my former unawakened state, where I spent most of my time, I would want to have an answer.
Makes you feel good, you mean?
Yeah,
Answer makes you-
yeah, and I think that if I'm understanding this correctly, the answer in a very broad general context that was given here is it depends.
Yeah.
It just depends. I always thought that was an evasive, you know, when I'd ask somebody something and they'd say it depends. I know I want an answer.
Yeah.
And but it does depend on the circumstances. Yeah, so I think I mentioned before that I'm a part of another sangha of sorts. You know, it's called the Fellowship in the World of Addiction, and you know, I get to go there with some frequency, you know, and I benefit greatly from that, and I benefit from, in one way by watching others grow in that. I often call it like watching flowers open. And so, you know, I was just thinking about that tonight because here I am with a group, and I think of everyone here without not trying to flatter people at all. It's not it, but I'm with a lot of open flowers. This is, I'm not coming here just for your teaching. I'm coming here for everyone.
Yeah.
And you know, everything that everybody's contributed is
remarkable.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I wouldn't drive
I mean,
5 hours just to hear me either. So.
I really, I really was, ever since I was up at that retreat with you all last time, looking forward to being with you again. So, yeah, and so at any rate, with regards to this, it's becoming for me in fits and starts, but it's becoming for me a little more seamless, a little more effortless, and I oftentimes surprise myself, you know, or not necessarily surprise myself, just subsequently appreciate I might have actually practiced it without having to sort of wait in that between that right intention and the right effort. You know, and I think today was just a wonderful example of that, to be stuck in a place for over an hour, literally. And I don't think I went more than 2 miles in an hour. And, you know, I would have been so vivid before.
Yeah.
And, you know, it would have just been boiling. And I didn't have to say, okay, let it calm down. You know, it just was a natural, quite natural. And I know why that is. I know why that is so. It comes from practice.
Yep.
And I think the other thing that I do, the more and more I can spend time with you and with everyone here, there's that sense of appreciation of how these things are all interrelated, and that to practice the right, to have concentrated, to look at meditation as we were talking earlier, as I came to appreciate in that retreat, as the purpose is to have concentrated mind, to know when to support right speech,
Yeah.
to support right intention, to support right effort, to support right, right mindfulness, all of it. And yeah, so I think the repetition, can just go on for whatever time I've got left. And
it will. They keep coming here.
and anyway, I would like to express my gratitude to everybody in the room for having such a wonderful, incredible, gathering. It's remarkable. It's really, really remarkable. And it's really incredible. Yeah.
And it's rare in the world, as the Buddha said in the Anapanasati Sutta. Sangha like this is rare in the world. 2,600 years ago and still today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. I like all of you, not everybody, but Larry, including Larry. Think about the effort, and I know it was most enjoyable, the effort you put in to developing your own understanding, and the significance of that now that Larry recognizes it in all of us. We've done the work, so we can be supportive, we can engage in right speech and be truly helpful to others because we've changed our minds. It's just that way. Thank you, Larry. Nick, good to see you tonight. I'm glad you made it too.
Glad I made it too. I certainly don't practice right speech at this time. Still got a long way to go.
Yeah, what the hell?
I have some confusion here because on one hand I heard that if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all.
You didn't hear that from me, but go ahead.
And then, well,
Where's my father?
and then I
Channeling.
Then I also heard that sometimes, even if you have to be disagreeable, there's sometimes that you need to say what you feel.
Yep.
Okay, so
What's the next?
It's in this sutta, and I'm not going to be cute as to say, well, just read it again, because the Buddha teaches us, not just in the Dhamma, but is something truthful and is it actually helpful? You don't have forget about the idea that it might be helpful in that person develop the Dhamma because they might not be interested. But is it really helpful? Is it not in the long run, not in this immediate, is this going to, here's a struggling alcoholic, let me give him a drink because that'll make him feel better right now. In the end, that's the worst thing you can do, isn't it? I mean, I'm talking, there might be a situation where health-wise somebody should have a drink. But the point that I'm making, framed by the Eightfold Path or framed by right understanding, is what got out of my mouth. Is it truthful? And is it really going to be helpful? And if not, let me keep my mouth shut. And again, I'm not talking about my best friend had just had a bad day and they called me on the phone and I say, well, why don't you go meditate? It's not very helpful, especially if you're not. But to say, oh, well, I've had days like that too. And I've had better days. You don't have to go much further than that, As you're developing the Dhamma, Nick's been doing this about 6 months or so. Is that right? Yeah. You're going to come up against seeming paradoxes, and the solution to the paradox is the paradox arises because of your own fabricated view, not because of the view that is developed through the Dhamma. But in order to understand the paradox, you have to develop the Dhamma. There's an article on the website called, I think, Paradox in the Dhamma. It's into that a little bit deeper, but you might want to check it out. Glad you're here. And it was Dependent Origination and the Myth of Non-Duality was the other one. That
I'm going to check it again.
If you forget it. And before I forget, I want to say, just because it was such a surprise to me, remember our friend Tom McCarran?
Mm-hmm.
Larry went to meetings before he died in New York. They were good friends. Isn't that amazing? Sorry about that. I got away from the Dhamma a little bit of wrong speech, maybe.
One small anecdote is that, or I think John and I used to have friends with a former member of the sangha. Remember at Galasso's? So, okay, it doesn't matter.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. And somebody that Matt knew too. He
Yeah.
used to come here. I know.
So the person was quite exaggerated quite a bit, and sometimes I would point that out.
Yeah.
And John said to me one night after dinner, "Why do
Is that helpful?
he said, why do you find it necessary to point out to so and so that he's a liar?"
Because, well, you have to understand the situation. This other gentleman was like I was. He knew everything there was to know about anything, and he always made sure that other people knew it.
But and he did he outright exaggerated to because of whatever. Because again, when we look at our motivations about what we're trying to do, that's the ego scorecard. How am I doing in this world?
Yeah.
And when I lose my scorecard, I don't know who I am and I don't know where I am. So meeting people where they're at, so that's the thing, it might have been true, but that's this whole thing about when people say, does this dress look good on me? Or, you're supposed to say somebody's truth. We're usually thinking about our own self. It wasn't helpful at all to
You never told me that my dresses look good.
It was just an ego-driven thing of my own irritation, with the baloney that was coming out of his mouth, and
Yeah, you couldn't. There were times when it was almost right speech to say, "Yo," but
it wasn't, because it would, meet somebody where they're out. The teaching, I didn't have the skill at all to be able to help John. Excuse me, the other John. One of the Johns, to be able to, do something that was truly helpful. All it would do is alienate, make the person feel bad, and that's not.
And it did.
That's never good.
Yeah, but also understand more at that time you were doing the best you could.
And
You
that's
really
what
were.
she was saying, she wasn't as skilled.
Yeah, you were, and that's something else that it's gotten late. So
But it was very helpful when you said that, because it really that was a teaching.
You didn't think so at the time.
No, I did.
I remember our
conversation. That's really interesting. I never thought of that. Yeah, because that comes up all the time. Why do I find it necessary to point out somebody else's inconsistency? What's the motivation there?
Being right.
Dharma teaching.
Yeah, it is. It is. Poor
One
John.
other thing I just want to say to Nick is that the more you're in this, the more you find out about the delicate layers that everything is made up of. And I sometimes say it's like peeling an onion, and sometimes you cry, but it's just all of these layers, and you'll reach this point where I think I got it, and then one more layer will come off. I thought I had it.
Then the next moment follows.
But also you learn that I think I've got it, and then you find out, well, maybe I didn't have it, and then you can say, but that's okay. Yeah, because then there's this other thing that'll make sense, this other insight that will come up.
Liz, I'm nowhere near there yet.
No, but
It's, the point is just don't get frustrated with it. Be gentle with yourself, and if you sit for a minute, the answer might reveal itself to you of the paradox, or of watching yourself have the Dhamma become more and more integrated in your life. And then all of a sudden one day you'll realize, oh, I did write a speech for that, where I wouldn't have done that last week. That's what it is.
And it's so important to recognize it.
And it reveals itself to you. But you have to be gentle as you go through this, because there can be a lot of self-flagellation that goes on if you don't.
You have to be gentle with yourself at all times.
It is.
Nick, you've made remarkable progress in the last 6 months, and I'm not just saying that to make you feel good. And like you said, this is the benefit of the sangha. These people were much more messed up than you.
I can't believe
John actually asked me not to go back to sangha way back when in Regelsville. He said if we didn't live together, he would ask me not to come back.
Did it have any effect on you at all? No?
None.
And that was right speech when I said that too. In fact, I would say it was extreme right speech. There's only one other time when I actually asked somebody not to come back here, and it was for completely skillful reasons. That had to be said. But, most of the time, people who don't want to listen to my BS just stop coming. But you're all different. What a great class! Yeah, we should continue to end this class. So thank you, Jane, for joining. Thank you all. We'll finish with metta as we always do. And just so you know, beginning in, I think, 2 weeks, we're going to have our summer series. It's going to be on the 3 marks of existence, and to spend a little more time really getting into the nature of dukkha in an experiential way. So we're going to spend probably 8 to 10 weeks on this primary focus of the Dhamma, which is gaining insight into 3 marks of existence. And I think doing it at this point in our sangha, and also kind of one after another. The sangha is related to the 3. The sutta is related to the 3 marks, is what we're going to do.
So that starts next week.
A week or 2. I got a couple other suttas I want to get to, and then we'll do that.
And when is the teacher training?
Oh, that's right. I forgot all about that. We got to. We'll talk about that. No, but not tonight. We got to think about it. Yeah. Teacher training. What?
Great idea. That is a great idea.
We should do that. We should do that.
When it's all done, a lot of graduation.
Find your relaxed meditation posture. Gently close your eyes, gently close your mouth. And just take a moment to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath. Set your mindfulness to the fore. These are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you for a really wonderful class. Peace. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, John.
Bye, Jen.
Bye.
Bye, Jane.
Putting the dinner together.
Yeah.
Oh, God.